The universe does not need your approval. It did not pause for your signature on a dotted line before stars flared into being and time began its long, untraceable sentence. It did not wait at the door of your opinions like a polite guest asking, "May I come in?" It flowed, it danced, it thundered, and only later did you arrive, eyes opening like two small windows, ears like delicate shells, and you called it the world. You named its rhythms laws, its blossoms beauty, its storms tragedy, and you soon came to think that your labels were the levers, your judgments the hinges, your approval the key that lets reality turn. But the tide does not consult the pebble, and the mountain does not tremble because a passerby frowns. The universe is a poem that pronounces itself, a river that carves its bed by moving, not by seeking permission from the stones. Your suffering, more often than not, arises from a quiet arrogance, the assumption that life ought to align with your convenience, that existence is a stage for your preferences. When the wind blows, you do not berate the sky for being gusty, yet when events blow cold through your arrangements, you take them personally, as if the weather were mutiny directed at your project. Listen, you are not a foreigner in a hostile land. You are the land. You are not an intruder in a moral bureaucracy of cosmic laws that stamp approved or rejected upon events. You are the happening itself, like a note that cannot be separated from the song, like a wave that cannot exist apart from the ocean. The trouble begins when the wave insists upon steadying the sea, when the note demands that the symphony play only in C major. So let us begin from the only honest place. Reality precedes your ideas about it, and reality is not waiting for your consent. Paradoxically, this is not a threat but a liberation. For if life is not obliged to carry the furniture of your expectations, you are free to sit anywhere. If the universe is not accountable to your anxieties can put down their clipboards and stop auditing everything that breathes. The world, as it truly is not asking you to evaluate it. It is inviting you to wake up in it, to participate in its marvelous, unrepeatable play. The universe does not need your approval in order to be. It invites your attention so that you may finally be as well. Now let us explore the depth of this simple, unsettling truth. For though the words are straightforward, the universe does not need your approval, their implications are a labyrinth, and the only way out is through. Consider the self you take to be you. It is a marvelous contraption of sensations, memories, and names. You think thoughts, and then you think about thinking. You watch yourself like a cat watching its tail, suspicious that someone else is behind the curtain pulling strings. Yet if you look closely, the you is less a commander than a commentary. Your heart beats without your approval. Your lungs sip and sigh without filing requests. Sensations surge up like springs in a hillside, and before the mind can catch them with a net of concepts, they are already flowing away into the next shimmering moment. You stand at the riverbank and say, "I am in charge," while the water glides past your knees and laughs. There is a great relief in noticing how much is accomplished without you, without the theatrical manager called ego. When you laugh genuinely, you do not decide to laugh. Laughter breaks out like sun through cloud. When you love deeply, you do not consult a ledger of pros and cons. Love opens like a flower facing the inevitability of the morning. Approval is a bureaucrat of the mind. Life is the dancer. Which would you rather be, paperwork or movement? Still, the habit is strong. The in says, "But if I do not approve, if I do not supervise, won't everything fall apart?" It is like a child who believes that by squeezing its eyes and clenching its fists, it can hold the house together during a storm. The house stands because beams are joined and foundations are laid, because wind has its own music and the structure its own resilience. Likewise, life coheres not by your tightness, but by its own intelligence, the kind that grew coral reefs and zebra stripes long before anyone had a theory about them. Imagine you are sitting by the sea at dusk. The horizon is that thin knife where day bleeds into night. The waves move in slow paragraphs, and the gulls annotate the margins of the sky. Now watch what the mind does. It attempts to frame the scene. Beautiful, serene, peaceful. None of these are wrong. Each is a stanza the mind writes in tribute. But if you fixate on the label, you miss the living prose, the salt in the air, the bell of a boy ringing at its own leisure, the exact shade of blue that has no name. The approval is a delay, the presence is immediate. This is not a philosophy of passivity, it is a philosophy of participation. To recognize that the universe does not need your approval is to discover that, in truth, you are not an external evaluator, but an internal expression. You are life, approving of itself by blooming. A tree does not seek a certificate to leaf, it simply leaves, and in that leafy gesture the world is affirmed. When you act from that same inner necessity, you find that life moves more artfully than when you push it with a stick called will. The art of living is not about getting reality to nod at your plan. It is about becoming the plan that reality is already dancing. Now let us press further into the paradox, for philosophy is a light best shone into the corners where dust gathers. The chief dust in the mind is the notion of control. Control is a tool, of course. It builds bridges and boils water. But as a world view, it becomes a cage with golden bars. The ego enthrones itself at the center of a universe it imagines as machinery, a contraption to be fine-tuned, corrected, fixed. Yet existence is not a machine, it is an organism. It is alive, improvisational, like jazz. And you do not conduct jazz with a wrench. Think of your life as a current in the great ocean. Currents do not approve of themselves. They flow as expressions of the whole sea. When the wind shifts or the moon tugs at the water, the current turns without shame or pride. Your suffering often comes from narrating your turning as failure or triumph instead of noticing the lunar pull. We speak of my path as if it were a paved road already measured and signed, when in truth your path is a moving riverbed laid down by the very act of your moving. You are not late, you are not early, you are on time because you are the time by which the clock of your life is set. But what of responsibility? Asks the mind, eager to prosecute. The insight that life does not require your approval does not absolve you of the intimacy of choice. It deepens it. A note does not ask the symphony for permission to sound, yet it must sound in tune. Awareness is your tuning fork. When you rest in attention, naked, unembroidered, you hear the sensitive music of the moment, a friend's fatigue hidden behind a brave smile, the whisper of your body asking for rest, the inkling that now is the hour to speak or to remain quiet. This is not the clench of control, it is the responsiveness of love. Let me give you a story. A man stands in a river holding a stick. He wants to stop the water, so he places the stick across the current and pushes with all his might. The river laughs and goes around. Exhausted, he thinks he has failed. A woman comes by and plants reeds at the bank. The reeds bend and hum, softening the water's edge. A child arrives and drops paper boats that bob and twirl, learning the river's language by plows. Which of them controlled the water? None. Which of them lived with it? All. The universe is this river. Your approval is the stick. Your participation is the reeds. Your wonder is the boat. We fear that without approval, chaos ensues. But what we call chaos is simply order we haven't learned to dance with. The seasons are not tidy. They are glorious. Waste decays into life. Fires seed forests. Loss clears the space into which new forms step. The human heart breaks not to punish, but to become more generous in its shape. When you stop insisting that life be symmetrical and polite, you behold a vast artistry unfolding with a coherence deeper than neatness. The universe is ensemble, not spreadsheet. From this angle, notice how approval sneaks into your spirituality. You may sit to meditate and judge the session like a movie critic. 2 stars, restless mind, too many thoughts. And in that very judgment, you miss the fact that restlessness has its own shimmering. Thoughts rise like birds you've never seen before. Some are awkward, some fierce, some tender. Meditation is not the production of silence for an audience called me. It is the intimacy of noticing that whatever appears is made of the same luminous fabric as the noticing. The attempt to approve or disapprove of your own mind is a cat chasing a shadow on the wall. The wall, meanwhile, stands untroubled. Another image. You are a lens. and life is light. Approval attempts to focus the beam by bending the lens with force. Crack. Not necessary. Let the lens be clear, and the light finds its own precision. Clarity is not a verdict. It is the absence of dust. When you give up standing as judge, the courtroom dissolves, and you are left with a meadow, simple being, waving in the wind. Now to the practical terrain, for a wisdom that never touches breakfast tables and late-night quarrels is only half awake. How does this insight alter the very way you stand in your shoes? First, watch how quickly should arises. It shouldn't rain today. They shouldn't speak to me. Like that. I shouldn't be anxious. Each should is a ghost stamp of approval withheld. Replace it gently with it is raining. They are speaking like this. Anxiety is here. You have not become apathetic. You have become accurate. From accuracy, intelligent response is possible. From should, only argument. Second, practice the art of soft hands. When circumstances tighten, drop the stick in the river. Soften your belly. Breathe as if you trust the room to hold you, which it does, because the room and you are not two. Notice how the impulse to seize and fix begins to relax. Out of that relaxation, action arises, not as a command, but as a natural gesture. You will be astonished how often the situation resolves, not because you conquered it, but because you joined it, like a dancer attending to the music rather than arresting it. Let us go deeper into the chamber where identity hums. The ego is a brilliant musician who has mistaken the mirror for an audience. It preens, it bows, it waits for applause. But mirrors are not impressed. They simply reflect. When you stop performing for the mirror, music returns. You realize your identity is not a fixed statue guarded by approval, but a living verb, an ongoing improvisation of sensations, meanings, and gestures. To protect a statue, you must wall it in. To accompany a song, you must listen. Listening is the essence of this path. Listening to what? To what is already here before your commentary surfaces. Listen to the body, its honest grammar of tension and ease. Listen to the mood of the room, the unspoken sway of people's hearts. Listen to the silence between sounds, the way it holds tone like a hand cups water. Approval shouts, listening attends. Approval narrows, listening enlarges. In listening, you feel the peculiar fact that the boundary between inside and outside is more like a shoreline than a wall, tide in, tide out, breath in, breath out. The so-called world and the so-called self are two sides of one coin, flipping endlessly in the air of awareness. Therefore, letting go of approval is not surrender to fate. It is union with actuality. When you join the dance, you are not dragged. You move. Responsibility becomes responsibility, the ability to respond. From this capacity grows a natural ethics, not one hammered together from rigid rules, but one that springs up like a garden from good soil. When you are present, cruelty is clumsy, dishonesty is sour, greed is noisy, and you feel it instantly. These are forms of resistance to what is. Kindness, clarity, courage, these are not approved behaviors. They are the way the universe behaves through a human being who is not trying to stand outside of it. Bring this to relationships. Approval tries to sculpt the other into a statue of your comfort. Love lets the other be a river. When you stop requiring your partner, your friend, your child to ratify your inner weather, you meet them as phenomena as wild and holy as mountains. You may set boundaries, you must sometimes, but a boundary is a hedge in a living garden, not a concrete wall. It is permeable, informed by conditions, revisable by care. Lovingly say no, and watch how the relationship can breathe. No without hostility is one of life's purest approvals of reality as it is, because it recognizes difference without condemnation. And what of failure? Approval regards failure as a stain. Awareness sees failure as compost. All the rich soil of your character is made from yesterday's fallen leaves. When an attempt falls short, let it fall all the way. Do not clutch failure with shame. It will rot into nourishment and grow new, more tender intelligence. You cannot approve your way out of failure. You can only witness your way through it. the human condition examined with a warm eye, is nothing but the universe learning its own capacities. It experiments through you. It wonders, can I sing here? Can I heal here? Can I forgive her? And the answer, whether yes or no, is an honest line in the poem. The tragedy is not that we sometimes fail. The tragedy is that we imagine we stand apart, grading the experiment, instead of recognizing that we are the experiment, beautifully, terrifyingly alive. To live authentically, then, is to walk naked of pretense into the weather of each moment. It is to feel the rain and not blame the sky. It is to speak truth without dressing it in armor, and to receive truth without demanding it arrive with flowers. It is to let your life be a question mark that writes itself rather than a period that stops the sentence. Authenticity is lightness, not the absence of depth, but the absence of false weight, the weight of your own approval ratings. Now for practice, because the body loves a ritual as the earth loves seasons. Try this. At day's end, sit quietly. Let the mind list its complaints and compliments. Let it tally what went well and what went badly. Then bow to the ledger and set it down. Ask, not as a demand, but as a curiosity, what did reality do through me today? Notice the movements that required no extra push. The moment you laughed without calculation, the time you listened without planning a reply, the small kindness that leapt out before approval could put on its inspector's hat. These are your true footprints. Follow them. Another small ritual. When anxiety rises, feel your feet. Wiggle your toes inside your shoes. Sense the directness of contact, the earth's patience. Anxiety is the mind's attempt to endorse what hasn't arrived. Feet are the body's reminder that you are standing in what is already here. Drop awareness from head to soul, and approval loses its seat. You are back in the room where the furniture isn't imaginary. And when grief comes, because it must, let it. Approval tries to put grief on a timetable, to apply for early release from tea. Anderness, grief is the ocean washing a shoreline newly shaped by loss. Let it remake you. In time you will discover that the shape it leaves behind is more spacious, able to hold sunlight and shadow with equal hospitality. This, too, is the universe moving without your say-so, and it is benevolent in a way that surpasses reassurance. It makes you big enough to include everything. We arrive at the threshold of transformation, not the theatrical sort where fireworks announce enlightenment, but the intimate kind that settles into the bones. Transformation is the discovery that you are not a spectator to life, but its articulation. You are not an orphan pressing your face to the glass of existence. You are the glass, the face, the breath that fogs it, and the hand that draws a heart in the fog. When this becomes more than a pretty metaphor, when it's felt, fear loosens, and in the space it leaves, ease enters like sunlight after a storm. Let us distill the living methods of such ease. First, trust the improvisation. Make plans. Yes, plans are like tempo markings in music, but hold them lightly. When reality shifts key, change with it, not as an act of defeat, but as the completion of a phrase. Second, cultivate sincerity. Say what you mean with the gentleness you would offer a child. Your words need not pass a popularity test. They need to ring true in your own chest. Third, give your attention as if it were water in a drought. Whatever you water grows. If you water resentment, it will become a thorny hedge. If you water wonder, a garden arrives and invites birds. Fourth, befriend boredom. Approval hates boredom because it cannot approve nothing happening. But boredom is only the surface of stillness. If you rest there a moment longer than you think you can, the silence opens and reveals its spacious textures, like a lake you thought was flat until you noticed the patterns of wind in the ripples. In stillness, you learn your original pace, the tempo of your breath when it is not running after an evaluation. Fifth, Isaiah's practice the clean no and the generous yes. The clean no is mercury pure, without toxins of apology or contempt. The generous yes is not approval, it is alignment. Together they make a life that feels like good architecture, open, strong, honest in its lines. As for meaning, it is not a trophy to be awarded after you have behaved properly. It is the flavor of living when you stop trying to taste it with a metal spoon. Meaning is the warmth of the tea, not the label on the cup. You do not need an external seal to certify your existence. Your very breath is the seal. The fact that the cosmos became conscious here, as you, is meaning grinning like a trickster. What will you do with it? The same thing water does with sunlight, make life. And spiritual freedom, it is not the escape from the world, but the freedom to be fully implicated in it without the drag of me against it. It is the recognition that the dancer and the dance are one gesture viewed from two angles. When you look from the dancer's side, you feel the sincerity of movement. When you look from the dance's side, you feel the inevitability of motion. Both are true. Both are you. Now, a meditative ending, not a conclusion, for circles don't conclude. They arrive where they began and reveal the center. Sit comfortably. Notice sounds brushing against your awareness like birds landing on a branch. Let sensations come and go without usher or guard. Imagine your skin is not a wall but a shoreline, tasting the inward rivers, greeting the vast sea. Feel the beating of your heart as a drum older than language. With each beat, murmur, softly, not in words but in the hum beneath words. Yes. Not yes as approval, but yes as recognition. Yes to the breath being breathed. Yes to the thought appearing and dissolving like foam. Yes to the ache that signals love has mattered. Yes to the quiet that is not empty but fragrant. Allow this simple question to hover like a lantern at dusk. If the universe does not need my approval, what if I stop needing it as well? What if I belong here by virtue of being here, the way a wave belongs to the ocean by waving? Notice how the shoulders drop when no verdict is pending. Notice how the room expands when you are no longer grading it. Notice how the next step presents itself when you are no longer trying to choreograph the floor. As you rise slowly, carry with you a friendliness toward what unfolds. You're not stepping into a hostile bureaucracy. You're walking further into yourself, which is to say, into everything. The clouds will continue their unapproved parade. The sparrows will annotate the margins of the morning. The city will pulse with a million unsanctioned gestures of kindness and error and art. You will breathe, and in your breathing the world will know itself a little more. Remember this, like a stone you keep in your pocket. Life is not seeking your stamp. It is seeking your presence. When you give it that, unguarded, curious, warm, the old machinery of approval rusts quietly in the yard. Children climb on it and invent new games. Grass grows through it. Sunlight makes lace out of its shadows. And you, having set down the burden of permission, find that you are light enough to float for a moment on the breeze of existence, listening, laughing, and saying the most honest thing one can say in the face of such a boundless play. Yes,